So welcome along, everybody, to the Question Corner, where I'll try to be quiet about birds for a change. This is a Question Corner special about performance and scale. We have a lot of questions submitted, and luckily we have exactly the right person to answer them because we, of course, have a special guest of Falco. So I will ask each of my panelists to give a quick little introduction for themselves. The first, of course, a very important member of our ship here is Nele. Nele, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi, I'm a consultant at Camunda, and I'm super happy to be part of the 10th Question Corner, and I'm super curious about our topic, and I think I also will learn something today.
Yeah, you're bound to. Thanks,
Yeah.
I am too. We also, of course, have me here as usual. I'm running across the ship like someone who doesn't know what they're doing, which is a lot like I'll be today. I'm a developer advocate with Camunda. I probably show up myself and Nele show up in these question corners quite frequently and ask questions, and I do tutorials and answer questions in the forum. And of course, we also have this week our special guest, an incredibly long time server at Camunda here, and the most qualified person we could possibly have for this topic, especially, and that is Falco. Falco, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. So yeah, I'm Falco Menger. I'm also a consultant at Camunda, actually one of the very first consultants ever hired, over 11 years now with the company. So that means I also know our products pretty well and can help with any kind of performance questions that you might have. So feel free to submit those. And maybe also interesting to know about me, I'm representing Camunda in the OMG. That means I actually participated in the creation of BPMN 2.0 back in the days, and then also in DMN and CMMN. And that might also qualify me for any kind of modeling question that comes up, but we'll see what's in the game.
Awesome.
So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, happily. And of course, as always, making sure everything runs on time and making sure that we don't forget everything. The person kind of making this run is our community manager, Luca. Luca, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, yeah, I'm Luca, I'm the community manager at Camunda, and I'm responsible for a lot of community activities here, and I'm really looking forward to this edition of the Question Corner, and I will tell you a bit about upcoming events and more at the end of the event.
Super, thank you so much, Luca. So what's going to happen next? Well, for those who don't already know how this works, it works like this. We have a bunch of questions on Slido. You can either grab your phones and take a lovely picture of this adorable QR code that I spent a good 2 or 3 minutes pasting into a slide. Or of course, you can follow the link that Luca has very kindly just posted on the, actually, is that the right link, Luca? That might be the, yeah, it is. Yeah. Sorry, I just making sure that I put the right link on my slide, but I think I have. So that's all fine. And then what you will see is when you click that link or follow it is you will find this lovely thing where we have an ability for you to answer your, give us some questions by putting them right here. As it happens, there are a lot of questions already asked. So if you have one that strikes your fancy and you would like ask for, you can upvote it. This is not a strict democracy, but we will definitely take into account upvotes, and as well, we will take into account questions asked by people who are here with us. We'll give them more favorable treatment than we would questions that for people who didn't even bother to show up. Not that they're not valued as well. The very first thing I want to do is actually do a little poll to find out what kind of people we have here. So I will just that's the wrong poll. Let's do one that's actually useful. Actually, this is actually a fun one, but I don't want to do that one. Let's do this one. So if you click that link, you should be able to see a quick question asking how you're getting on with Camunda. This is an important question because Falco is going to be answering a lot of questions and the amount of detail he's going to be giving is going to depend very heavily on the kind of audience we have here. So if you are working, for instance, if you're in production, your system is stalled and you need help desperately, well, this is first of all an interesting way of trying to get help, but it's probably going to work out. Falco can probably do his best, and if not, you can blame him directly for it. We've got a few people have ventured to ask some to answer the poll question. We'll answer the one at the end, but mostly in production of the 4 people who have decided to, we have a 5th. decided to answer. We got a few more there. Not a lot of people who are very new, which is great. It means we can answer questions that are a little more complex. We can now assume a certain amount of knowledge about Camunda for the attendees. So thank you very, very much for that. So let me, without further ado, 6 people in production. A lot of production people. Okay, so we got a lot of people who know their stuff about Camunda already, and that makes a lot of sense. I think by the time you're worried about scaling and performance, you're probably in production. So let's kick things off by showing the questions. So here are the questions right here. I'm going to throw the first question to Falco. Falco, pick your poison.
Let's get started right with this first thing that's on the top of the list. It's because that's already a performance question. I think we have even 2 that go in a similar direction here. So yeah, the question is, if you're using multi-instance, how can you, or how much impact would this have on performance, right? And first of all, we may quickly want to recap what multi-instance is. In BPMN, you have the capability so that tasks or entire subprocesses can iterate over a collection of things. And then, yeah, the engine will either sequentially or even in parallel create lots of instances of that single task or maybe the entire subprocess. That also works for call activities, so you can create child processes as well in multi-instance. And that's pretty cool. But of course, this has some limitations because it's still happening all in the context of a single process instance. So yeah, large collections for multi-instances are difficult because Camunda is designed in a way that runs separate process instances very efficiently and parallelizes them without any impact. So you can have large amounts of parallel instances running that are not touching each other. But if they are in the same process instance, that's a problem. So typically, we are saying that anything below 100 or 1,000 instances should be fine. Like above 100, it might already get tricky depending on what you're designing, and above 1,000, it's definitely not advisable to do that. I think there was actually some work going on to improve that situation and maybe do a redesign of this concept, but I think that's not really matured yet.
Cool, thanks, Falco. So yeah, this is a really common, I think it's good that Falco addressed this. It's a super common place to find performance problems. So yeah, I see the same thing happening all the time. Falco, I have a quick question for you. Do you think that it's worth it if people actually redesign their processes to avoid this pattern, or is it that bad?
As always, if the question is about performance, you should first measure if you really have a problem and then redesign or optimize your design, right? So that's definitely, you always start first with a benchmark, you measure and then see what the problem is. And if you find out that then this is a problem, then you can change that. And a typical way to change that would be, for example, to decouple the different instances that you're running in your loop and run them in separate process instances. And then they can easily be parallelized. The transactions get much smaller, and that's easy to handle for the engine. So in particular, just to emphasize that a little bit, when you have a large multi-instance collection, you will end up in having a huge database transaction that contains thousands and thousands of entries in the worst case. And that is then just too much for the database to handle. Camunda couldn't really care, but the database usually doesn't like that so much.
It can be so persnickety. Yeah, that's true. Okay, cool. Thanks, Falco. Nele, do you have a question you would like to talk about?
Maybe let's take the next one. I saw that, and I think we can answer that. So the question here is, if we have 3 nodes of Camunda sharing one schema, how we can make sure if we have one process here that starts with a timer event that this process is just started once and not 3 times. And what do we need to do for that? And actually, if those 3 nodes are pointed to the same database, that would mean we have one job for the timer in the database, and as soon as a node is picking up that job, it's going to be locked for that node. So it will automatically just be executed once. So basically Camunda takes care of it, that it's just executed once.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. Nele explained it perfectly. That's exactly what happened. The job, even if you have a bunch of nodes, the job only exists once, and we have a good locking mechanism. So it's not going to happen. Cool. Thanks, Nele. Let me see if I'm brave enough to pick something.
Let's take the next one immediately because it's also about timer.
Yeah, let's do it. Good point. Go ahead, Falco. All yours.
All right.
I mean, I could answer it if you. Okay, yeah, let's give it a go.
Give it a shot.
Niall's opinion is on timer precision. So this is a really common misconception that someone might use the timers initially and think, I'm going to set this to 5 minutes. And what I expect is that in exactly 5 minutes, this timer will expire and the process will continue or be triggered, right? This is actually not how the engine defines timers exactly. What actually happens is the engine says when we arrive at a timer, let's say it's a 5-minute timer, it then calculates in 5 minutes, it'll be this time. And that's when I'm going to move. Now, you would think, well, Niall, that is exactly what I want, but that is not actually when the engine will pick it up, because the job executor is actually the thing that is polling occasionally to find what jobs are currently active. So the problem actually is going to occur if the job executor's polling is quite infrequent. And what will happen is the timer will expire after 5 minutes, but if your engine doesn't realize the job's waiting to be picked up, it'll then make another minute before it actually runs. So the first concept to throw out the window is that you should not expect the timer to actually be activated exactly when you've set it. Think of it more like it will not trigger until after this time has elapsed. That's a much more accurate way of thinking about the timers. So how do you actually make things more precision oriented and more scheduled? Well, you just increase the frequency that the job executor is going to be picking up jobs. That'll usually pick up timers much faster and much closer to the time. If you have a bunch of timers that go off every 30 seconds or something, and your job executor is set to be picking up jobs every 2 minutes, well, that's clearly going to have a discrepancy. So, Falco, what did I get wrong there?
No, I think that was going in the right direction for sure. So I think 5 minutes is even still okay-ish. If you go down into the seconds or you want millisecond precision, then that's the wrong concept. We cannot guarantee real-time precision there. And for most business processes, that's normally okay. Yeah, and you can play a little bit with the acquisition, the polling configuration of the job executor. Like in the default configuration, there could even be delays of 2 minutes maximum, because we have this waiting concept that if we don't have jobs for a while, we just don't poll that often and increase the waiting time. So you could squeeze that all the way down to maybe poll every 500 milliseconds or so. That obviously increases database load, but would give you higher precision on your timers. What is guaranteed though is that it not ever fires early.
Which goes against everything I stand for as someone who is obsessed with being early for everything. So for me, the engine has put the wrong preference, but that's just me. Okay, Falco, do you want to take another one?
There's another one that goes into multi-instance. Maybe we can combine that a little bit.
How to generate large amounts of executions to support batch processes for instance multi-instance.
Mm-hmm. So as we have said earlier, for multi-instance is not the best concept if you really have large amounts, let's say greater than 1,000. And therefore, you should do that programmatically using the API. So for example, if you really have a business process that needs to run on a batch of, let's say, 100,000, then a multi-instance activity with 100,000 entries would create 100,000 lines in a single database transaction and probably kill your database server. So what you would do is do this programmatically, do the instantiation programmatically. I think we have some code examples somewhere on GitHub on how to do this. So you would basically, for example, use the Java API and go in a loop and just create process instances one by one. And each process instance itself will be created in a separate transaction. And you could then also create jobs, for example, to say you don't immediately start the workflow, but rather create an instance and then just put it to sleep with an asynchronous continuation. And then the job executor would then pick up the batch and work on it in the pace and capacity that it has.
Yeah, thanks, Falco. That's awesome. Yeah, I think you're right. We did create an example of GitHub. I think Ragnar created it, I think I recall. I'll try and find that and maybe post this under the video on YouTube when it goes live tomorrow. Cool, thanks so much. Nele.
Yeah, I was kind of distracted from the next question. I tried to understand it, but I can't. I don't know, maybe we can get it together, but it's help in BPMN design. User can assign to 2 tasks in parallel with inclusive gateway. How can same user no task assigned to 3 in the same parallel?
I did notice that Ahmed, the asker of this question, is actually in the call. So
perfect.
Yeah, if you could actually go to the link and maybe could you clarify this a little better? I'll see it pop up down here and we'll come back to it. But I think, Nele, you have some clarifications that you need about this question. What can you?
As far as I understand, we have an inclusive gateway. We split to 2 passes. We have 2 user tasks there in parallel, and then we end it. And we want to make sure that if one task is assigned to one user, that the third task, but I don't know where the third task is coming actually. Is the third task coming after the parallel flow, or is it coming? Yeah.
Should we maybe try a visualization?
Yeah, we can.
Of what we're understanding here.
Yeah. Well, why not? Nele, do you want to show the modeler?
I can show them.
Do we have cloud modeling thing somewhere?
No.
Do you know that?
Wait, share the screen.
I mean, any modeling tool you have at hand.
This one, you know this one. So I understand it the following. We have a parallel thing which starts with an inclusive gateway because it also ends with an inclusive gateway. And so something like this. And then, And then this is task 3. So here, that's how I understand the design. Correct me if you understand something else.
I think actually, Ahmed just actually gave an additional bit of information that's quite important. He basically wants to add a task to this process, I guess in runtime.
He just posted a forum link.
Very good.
Okay, where I have to, is it in the chat?
In the Zoom chat, yeah.
So this is I can kind of understand this question, I think, because it comes up occasionally, which is, I guess, when you're live in the process, you want to be able to add a new task because your process has changed. How does that affect the currently running thing? Do you want to sort of explain that, Nele?
I mean, I don't know. I have an idea now. Maybe that could, well, let me explain. You could do something like that if you decide you need an additional task. You use an event subprocess that could be triggered by, for example, a variable. And once this variable is triggered, this task comes alive. Maybe something like this.
I personally love that. That's a very, very nice solution. Yeah.
And that would be task 3 then. And this is some condition triggered.
Yeah, that's actually the CMMN style way of doing it. Just have some event that creates additional tasks. On the other hand, the drawing in the forum almost looks like it's really just the first task in the process determines how many of the outgoing tasks will be needed. So one way to do it could also be using multi-instance, having a multi-instance subprocess or a multi-instance task here. I mean, this maybe I should actually share the forum model.
Oh yeah, you can share if you want to. Yeah, share your idea.
Let me just show people what I'm looking at. Oops.
Okay.
So it sounds a little bit like this first task here determines which one of these are needed. And then, well.
Okay. And how many times?
So then maybe could be an option to, for example, create a list in this first task and then work off that list in the later process. On the other hand, that would mean this stuff here needs to be quite dynamic and you wouldn't maybe not seeing it this.
Is there a reason to make subprocess around those? I mean, it's just one call activity. I think you could even leave out the subprocess here.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. This could make it much easier to read.
Yeah. But
cool. I think we've solved this. I think well done, everybody. The mystery has been solved. Ahmed, I hope that's useful. If not, post on the on the forum and say something along the lines of Falco didn't help me and I need someone else to help. Let me share my screen again because I want to get to some of the performance questions, considering that we have Falco at our disposal. And actually a question that I've linked up there to the very top, which I'm really interested in having a discussion about, is what is the best database if all you care about is performance? So Falco, this is it. Just give us a name of a database, solve this problem in one sentence, easy.
If it would be that easy, yeah. No, in fact, Camunda by design works pretty well on many databases. There are a couple of favorites that are more frequently used, I would say, but this doesn't really mean that we have any preference. And honestly, it always depends also on the use case and also on your skills. For example, it doesn't really help if you're, for example, a Postgres user and you're comfortable using that and you know how to work with that, then it doesn't really help for performance reasons that you switch to another database and learn everything from scratch. It would actually be better you use your Postgres skills to just optimize it accordingly and then, yeah, tune it for your workload. So I don't think this is necessarily a product question. It's more a question of really tuning your system. And regarding tuning, maybe it's a good point in time for a shameless plug here. Let me steal the screen from you. As I said earlier, right, if you have performance questions, it's always about really measuring what's your bottleneck and then acting to it. And first thing you want to find out if you're talking about the database is really, is the database even the bottleneck? And I have a great little tool that I can share with you, and that we can also then post the link to afterwards. It's totally not a developer tool, it's a spreadsheet. So people might hate me for it, but it's actually proven to be quite helpful. Let me increase the size a little bit so we can read something. So this spreadsheet is a template that you could copy and use for yourself. And the idea is you can basically describe your load testing scenario very precisely with all the different parameters that might go into it. And that involves, for example, your load generator and the details of that, the engine configuration that you're using, the database you're using, and then also, for example, if you're working with external tasks, the way how those are implemented, what kind of resources they get. And then you can measure whatever is interesting to you. You know, some people might be interested in throughput. Other people might be interested in the process instance duration, or a combination of both of them. And obviously, both of them kind of work against each other here, right? So you could have throughput high, but then the duration might be long. Yeah, and then you can measure all sorts of parameters, like details of how much resources you consumed. And then from these kind of things, you can then find out, for example, the simple question, is the database the bottleneck or the Camunda application server or the pod that Camunda is running on? Most of the times it's actually the database because Camunda is pretty small and fast, but can also be the other way around. And then you would want to analyze that. So yeah. That's a tool that people can use, and we'll share the link to this afterwards. Or actually, we can even put this right away into the Zoom chat.
Nice, thanks, Marco. That's really useful.
No, wait, that was the wrong link. Sorry about that.
Let's try and do round two.
I'm really ruining our experience here. So the Google Docs link is the right one.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Falco. That's really cool. Have you used this yet with actual customers, or have you used this with internally? Yeah.
I've been using the ZB version of that with a lot of customers, and the Camunda version. Actually, the whole creation of this came from a Camunda project. So yeah, both.
Nice. That's really, really cool. I'm very, very glad. Thanks for sharing that. So let's move along to next question, which I think is important. I think it's probably one of the biggest factors of performance that we haven't even talked about yet, which is performance difference with history levels. That is 5 lovely words, potentially 5, 1, 2, 3, yes, that do actually hinder performance hugely. Who wants to take this one? Okay, I can do it. Then we'll do the thing where I say the wrong thing and then Falco corrects me. So there are a bunch of history levels. So first of all, the Camunda has like two sets of tables, runtime and history. The runtime contains all of the stuff needed for the engine to actually do stuff in production. And the history tables has everything that has happened, including variable stuff, depending, of course, on your history level, which is the important thing about here, because you can store everything that has ever happened or just the last known variables and just the path the thing has taken, no variables at all. It's a few different options. And that drastically changes how much work each state transition needs to take between commits. So the lower the amount of data you need to commit, the faster you can get through stuff. So some of the fastest performing users with Camunda don't use any history at all because they can run it all in memory on a microservice somewhere, and they just don't store anything in history because they don't need it. Because in some cases you don't really need to check these things. And then other times the history is really important because if you use optimize and want to do all sorts of stuff with checking how your process is actually working, you can do that. So the history levels, I think, the more you store in history, the slower each commit could be, and the bigger the database will get. Falco, correct me.
No, that was pretty correct. That's indeed having a big impact. Just last week, I had a customer preparing for the holidays in the States, and they were a little late with their load testing. That's, by the way, one recommendation. If you expect a high load scenario, do the testing as early as possible so you don't run into surprises when you start going live. So this concept of doing load testing a week before going to production and then somehow, I don't know, throwing hardware at it, that doesn't really work out. Now, yeah, long story short, they reduced the history level and then it became a little bit easier for them to handle their load. So yeah, definitely. Oh, and one thing I wanted to add regarding the turning off persistence completely, there's a great talk from the Camunda Con in April from 24 Hour Fitness. Jimmy has presented their like really crazy high load scenario and the hacks that they are using in order to get really the last out of Camunda.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a really good talk. It's really worth watching if you want to see how much you can put through Camunda performance-wise. Yeah, I agree. Falco, out of interest, do you have what would you suggest people should start with history level wise? By default, we have full if you download the distro. Do you think people should start with that? Is that recommended for any project?
Yes, definitely. I would, as I said earlier, like before I optimize, I need to measure if it's really a problem. And I guess most customers don't really hit performance numbers where this is a topic. Mm-hmm. Well, and if you do, you probably know early enough, and then you can, see what you want to do. There's also the way to do custom history levels where you really precisely say which things you want to persist. So for example, if you have that big JSON variable with a lot of big data inside, you could just accept remove that single variable from history and prevent that from being written. So there's some good hacks around that.
Cool. Nele, do you have any input that you want to give about the history level stuff?
I think you said most things already. I just can add that sometimes I see projects, they start with almost non-history level. And as Falco said, it's better to start with full just to find out if it's a real problem. Yeah, so.
Cool.
Yeah, and obviously the history level has two impacts. One is your runtime performance when you are, while you are processing, and that could already be too much for the database. But then there's this long-term impact as well, meaning how fast does your data volume grow? Because history keeps piling up and piling up. And we have obviously the cleanup procedures for that nowadays. So you can configure the engine that it already automatically cleans up after itself. But we do have customers that have so much data they produce every day that the database cannot even keep up with the cleanup operations. So in that cases, there are some more advanced hacks, like, for example, working with database partitions that you can then clean up. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Falco. That just reminds me to maybe do a question corner on random hacks that Falco knows about. Yeah, thanks a lot. Nele, is there any questions that have piqued your interest that you'd like to discuss?
You can take off the other one as well, I guess, right? We did that.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, we did
Yeah.
that.
We have one here. Maybe just take the next one here about variable usage. Impacts, if any, of size of variables using JSON or wrappers, byte arrays, variables. Yeah, in general, I would say if you have a really long JSON or a big JSON, you would need to parse it, and that could affect the performance because if it's big, that's an extra operation you need to do for parsing. So it would be better to store smaller objects inside the engine or smaller chunks in the engine. Niall, do you like to add something? Maybe I forgot something. That's just my quick thought on this. So,
I mean, you know me, I wouldn't use one word if 10 would do, but I think what you said makes a lot of sense. Generally speaking, you want to keep variables small for a whole bunch of reasons, as Nele said. It's way more efficient as far as the engine's concerned to have basic variables than it is to have JSON objects. The question would be, and this is something I actually don't know the answer to, so Falco, maybe you could enlighten me. Let's imagine you have, what's better, to have one object with 20 variables in it or 20 individual primitive variables in a given process instance?
That depends on your access patterns. So if you have individual variables, those would actually be lines in the database, and that give you capabilities of, for example, searching for data, sorting based on data. If we think about optimize and KPIs in the end, then this gives you analysis possibilities, and you don't have to do any reprocessing. So it's generally good to rather have variables than big objects. And yeah. On the other hand, also a big object has quite a penalty if you ever change it and you're running with full history. So when you have full history on, every variable change would be locked with the old value and a new value, and that potentially even in multiple places in the database. So imagine you have that fat big JSON object or XML object that you are storing in there. You change a single character in that, we need to copy the entire massive thing and keep a lock that this value has changed. So there are really evil side effects which usually speak against it. And just to add some sugar here, let me steal the screen from you. We actually have a lovely extra bit of documentation called the Camunda best practices. And the first thing that we say in here is really store the relevant data only. If you can, just have an ID to whatever business object you're dealing with and keep the data out of the engine. Usually the business process doesn't really need all your customer or order data or whatever it is. We only need the reference. So for example, we can tell a service to do something with that object, or we might need some data to decide our branching points in the process, right? On a gateway, we might need to check on a certain value, and then that little value could be done into a separate variable. All the other stuff from your order we don't really need, and we don't have to have all that in the engine.
Awesome, thanks, Falco. So we'll probably take maybe 2 more questions, but they're both been just entered in by our lovely viewers, anonymously, of course, because obviously they're too ashamed to put their names to these questions. So this I like this one a lot because it's a nice mystery. Okay, you ready for a mystery, Falco?
yes.
What could a reason for sequential multi-instance subprocess taking 20 seconds to complete each iteration, even with async before on the end event? No listeners. Guys, this is
no mystery to me. Remember how I said earlier that the multi-instance creates huge transactions? And what many people don't expect is that the join of a multi-instance, if you run it in parallel, would be, wait a second, this is a sequential one, right? Maybe then my answer doesn't apply, but I'll still do it for the fun of it. We have a parallel, we have a parallel multi-instance. That means, and we have a massive parallel execution tree. So we have the execution that is for the root for the entire process instance, and then for every parallel instance inside there, we would have a separate execution, and that's depending on how many instances you have in your multi-instance. That would be a huge tree and takes a lot of time to commit. And the join of the multi-instance actually the more killing thing, because every time one instance finishes, we have to update the entire execution tree to register, okay, that one finished and the others are moving forward. That's a bit of a security measure against losing updates, optimistic locking and the likes, and that's getting really expensive. So now back to the mystery, if it's sequential and takes 20 seconds to complete each iteration, that's a bit of a harder one. You have an async on the end event. Okay, I mean, if it's async, then it could be related to job executor polling. That could be one explanation. Although if it's the job executor creating a new job, it would immediately create that in memory and acquire it itself. So I don't know, probably one needs to look deeper into this.
I think you're right. The first thing that struck me was probably job executors not polling enough, because I mean, also I'm wondering how they're determining the completion. 20 seconds is exactly like, is that like the thread, or is that the how are they counting that? I'm not really sure. But I do agree, this is a fun mystery that I would love to answer, but obviously I might put this in the forum to see if we can get a more detailed answer from Falco later. It's a fun mystery though, I like it a lot. And actually, speaking about those fun mysteries, another question, the very last one we'll answer just now, is also just entered by somebody here watching us, and that is, if instantiating process instances for a batch instead of the multi-instance, as you just said, what ways are there to prevent this step from timing out? So I think the assumption here is that creating the batches is one thread that just keeps going, right? But I think with the way it could work, it could actually run in multiple. It could actually commit each time. But I do. What do you think, Falco?
Yeah, the key thing if you have a really large batch is actually to do the batch creation outside of a transaction. You might want to update somewhere your parent process, or somewhere you want to store how many instances you did create. And that's where we have example code on, where you, for example, say you have a parent process and it has a service task to then create the child instances for a batch. And the parent process is updated from time to time. So we have a variable to track how many child instances we have already created. But then the actual creation is done in a separate thread that can run however long it needs, and doesn't really block a database transaction. Because in a well-configured system, you should have a transaction timeout that limits the length of a database transaction. Otherwise, your scalability might not be so great.
Cool, thanks, Falco. We will leave it there for the questions. It's just for me to throw it for the last few slides to Luca. Luca, do you want me to share my screen or do you want to share yours?
You can share yours.
Okay, that makes things a little more complicated. It's fine, I got this. I'm a professional. I can handle this. Okay, there we go. Let's do it. Here we go.
Yeah, so we have upcoming events, and as some of you might know, we always have meetups taking place all around the world, and awesome meetup organizers organize those. And yeah, you can check the upcoming meetups on our website. I will post the link here into the chat. We have those are all virtual events. So one from Frankfurt, one from San Francisco, Hanover, and Edinburgh. Maybe you can go to the next slide now. And we have webinars coming up. So we have a live demo coming up on December 15th, and also another webinar about top 5 process automation trends to look for in 2021. So I think that sounds quite interesting. And the next question corner is not on Christmas, because usually it's always the last Thursday of the month. But we thought maybe you don't want to join us for Christmas this time, so we will do the next one in January. And next slide, please. we have a developer newsletter. So there we always, on a monthly basis, we send out great technical content about, for example, product updates, new releases, also resources for developers and upcoming events. So I will also post the link into the chat here. So if you, you should sign up if you want to get this content. And yeah, so see you all end of January, I would say, hopefully.
Cool. Thank you so much, Luca. That this top 5 automation trends to look forward to. I will be paying very close attention to that one because I'll be there. Myself and Falco will both be 2 of the panelists on that. So I'm looking forward to finding out which trends Falco sees coming and arguing with him about it. So hope you are too, Falco. Despite, I of course argued that we should do it on Christmas, that you lovely Camunda people would love to spend Christmas asking questions in the question corner. But I was, of course, shouted down. But thanks very much, everybody. I'd like to, closing out, I'd like to say thank you very, very much to Nele, of course, as always, for being as the additional host to as I am as well. And also, of course, Luca for actually organizing everything and making sure everyone had this link and made sure it was promoted and you knew about it. And of course, Falco from taking valuable time out of his day for correcting me, or the case may be, not correcting me, but instead answering really important performance questions. This video will be up on YouTube, I think, tomorrow sometime. Thanks for coming. We'll see you guys in January. Enjoy Christmas. Thanks again, everybody. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.